Thank you. There's one point, you want to say something, Dr. Rangarajan? I had a brief comment to make. The question that was not answered by any panelists, so if I can take half a minute, Mr. Vivek and Mr. Duggal raised this question about the nexus between business and politics. It's very easy, you know, until our political class agrees on 4 or 5 issues, I don't think this nexus can be broken. I mean, firstly, we all know that a very small proportion of the total cash, the total black money is in the form of cash. I mean, when the Income Tax Department did a survey, they found that the amount seized, the proportion of search and, the proportion of assets seized in search and seizure raids were barely 6% of the total. Let's say it's about 10%. Okay, what are these? There's no limit on what a political party can spend, although there are limits on what individual candidates can spend. Anonymous donations of up to 20% can be made to any political party. Okay? The way the income tax rules for political parties go, that's the rule. Thirdly, I mean, there are other points that we can discuss. It's a very, very simple issue. There are about 1,900 so-called registered political parties, registered with the Election Commission. Only 400 of them have actually put up candidates for election, either in the state or at the central level. So political parties themselves, their existence is itself a source of money laundering, a major kind of money laundering. And these are huge issues that we can discuss at some length. Dr. Rangarajan.
Some questions have been raised about widening the tax base. I think it is very important because at our stage of economic development and the level of per capita income, I believe we are not raising adequate revenue. I mean, if I remember right, the 2007-8, it was a peak. The gross tax revenue of the central government was something like 11.7% of the GDP. If anything, we have come down from it by almost 1%. I mean, I think we are now at 10.8% of the GDP. Therefore, the need for augmenting the revenues is very much there. I mean, I think when we talk about fiscal deficit, it is not as if that in order to maintain the deficit, you should cut the expenditure. I think that's not the only way to do it. We should also raise the revenue in a very legitimate way, in a way in which it doesn't hurt. I mean, I think there is scope for it. I mean, I think we cannot rule out that there is no scope for further taxation in India. I think we should do that. In fact, when GST was contemplated and we were all working on it, it was one of the reasons was that it will widen the base. I mean, bring all services, all goods, and the argument at that particular time was that by widening the base, we can reduce the rate and still collect a larger amount of revenue because the base will expand. Now, somebody had asked whether there will be disruptions because of the simultaneous introduction of the aftermath of the demonetization in GST. Now, GST introduction by itself is not a disturbance. I mean, I would differentiate between the disturbances caused by demonetization and the disturbance caused by GST. I think they are of a very different nature. But even the introduction of GST clearly warrants adequate preparation before introducing the tax. We have to capture many things, interstate transactions and so on, which are complicated, and we need an IT backbone in order to do that. But I want to say that 2 things. One, as far as the indirect taxes are concerned, a widening of the base can occur because of the introduction of GST. Perhaps it will take time, but hopefully during the course of the year it will be done. On the direct tax side, I mean, I think there was a certain period after the post-reform period when the ratio of direct taxes to the indirect taxes started rising very fast. Now, what has happened in the more recent period is it is getting reversed. It is not as if it is in one direction. It is getting reversed. And it is getting reversed also, as was pointed out by Mazumdar, that the oil duties suddenly pushed up the indirect taxes. The problem with raising the direct tax thing is really there is not sufficient consensus in the country to widen the base. I mean, every time you go, the exemption limit should be raised. I mean, I think this has become almost a song every time before the budget, and the finance minister, depending upon the circumstances, agrees to it. Now, I don't think that is the right approach to the problem. I think the 10% is the tax rate on the lowest slab. I think this is not really a very high rate. Therefore, we should show to the people that we can knock off some other taxes, but use the income tax as the important vehicle for doing it.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. Okay, we are right now, it's about to be 1:10. Are there a few questions before we break for lunch? Oh my God, that's too many. I won't be able to take all of them, sir. Self-select before I'm accused of being authoritarian. My request to you, sir, is we'll just take 2 or 3 questions, and if they're addressed to a specific person, we'll take the gentleman over there, and you. Please, sir. I'm being authoritarian. Yes.
My question is on demonetization. If you see as a monetary economist, I'm not going into the philosophical, ethical, and policy and fiscal aspect of demonetization. If you see the currency in circulation figures over the last 10 years, we see that in a country, we are becoming more and more cash intensive when we should be going down. Today, currency is 15% of our M3 money supply. It's growing at a very fast rate. Money supply is growing at 15%. Currency in circulation is also it should be growing at 2 to 3%. My personal estimate of currency requirement of our economy is around 10 lakh crores, while we are having 16 lakh crores in circulation. Primarily because of 2 factors. Keynes gave 3 important motives of holding money: transaction, precautionary, and speculative. And the 4th motive, if he was alive today, you would have said tax evasion motive, okay. And the majority of it. So, all right. I believe demonetization is a message to the society that we can't afford to stay with this kind of a cash when you should be going down.
All right.
And that's one. The second question
please.
Second question is just the amount of reserves which are going to come to Reserve Bank of India. Lots of fellows are saying, give it to government. You can't give to government what government gives to us, because for a currency in circulation liability, there is a government security. In the Reserve Bank, currency department balance sheet against the currency in circulation is foreign exchange reserves, not the government securities. So that's just not possible to distribute that amount. It is just go as a capital reserve, and in future, Reserve Bank can use it. If the currency in circulation increases, government need not incur additional debt. So I would like that question to be clarified by former
Thank you for your comment.
Yeah.
Your name once again, please.
Satyendra Naik.
Thank you, Mr. Naik. Okay, we'll just take 2. Quick, please. Keep your comments brief, please. Ask the question.
Greetings to the panel. My name is Karthik Natarajan, Chartered Accountant from Mr. B.K. Khare's office. Mr. Thakurta, through you to the panel. Demonetization has targeted the cash component of black money. How to go after the balance black money in the form of, say, property, stocks, etc. Sure, Benami Act is a way forward. Are there enough happening? Is there enough happening that you see?
Okay.
And the second one, Dr. Rangarajan, sir, it's an honor to hear you. You have a rich experience and the benefit of a wonderful view of the development of Indian economy over the years. Sir, in your view, do you see the governmental tools such as budget, policies, tax treaties, etc. really serve the intended purpose? Do you remain optimistic about the rich-poor divide, bridge, narrowing in, say, a decade or so.
Okay, this issue is of inequality. I must recount to you something that our Honorable Union Minister for Water Resources, Ms. Uma Bharati, said. She claimed that our Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, was more Marxist than Karl Marx, as an aside. Yes, sir. Last question. Last question, sir. Yes, sir.
May I?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
I'm sorry I've kept you waiting.
No
You've
problem.
been putting
So
your
my
hand up.
name is Aditya.
You'll have to excuse me. Yes.
My name is Aditya Malkani and I head the offices for King's College London in India. Now my question is specific to the education sector. We know that higher education in India is both a central and state subject, with both the center and state having different responsibilities. We also know that educational institutions in India have to find different ways and means of generating income to develop structure, to hire faculty, resource persons, etc. We also know that it's difficult for the government to keep providing more and more subsidy. Do you feel, it's a very simple question that I have, do you feel that educational institutions should follow the American model of a higher out-of-state tuition for students coming in from different states?
All right, sir. Thank you. I'm going to, please excuse me, sir. We are already almost at 1:15. We need the concluding remarks and reactions to what has been said, and we have the vote of thanks. Ashok, we go in reverse order. Would you like to say something?
Well, I have only one thing to say, which is, I go back to this, which is nothing to do with this particular budget, but I think that budget itself as an exercise needs to be redefined. Bringing up so much of hype around exercise that gets done once in a year, without any perspective plan that the government commits itself to publicly with so much of debate and discussion, is, I think, a very unfair way of making the public expect something from the government and the government making itself accountable to them. It's too short a period in the life of a nation to, live from year to year of accountability. And even the other things that happen, the 5-year plans, etc., that would happen, the entire discussion and debate was restricted to a very elite group of people. That will not stand the scrutiny of the current society.
Okay.
And therefore, we need to revisit this entire paradigm of how the government makes promises, then executes those promises, and then comes back with a report on its performance.
Okay, thank you so much. Surajit.
Okay, so I think Dr. Rangarajan would be better placed to answer this question, but let me just try and take this thing about the demonetization and the question of the currency. As you yourself kind of argued, the biggest driver of increase in the currency in circulation has been actually increase in the net foreign exchange assets of the RBI over the last. Actually, if you see the currency GDP ratio in India has increased it was declining till you opened up, but it's increased over the last. And this is not something that has happened only in India, it has happened in, particularly after the global crisis in other parts of the world. So it's not something really that the public is controlling, precisely how much of the currency is. What the public can only choose is how much it wants to hold currency and how much it wants to put into deposits with banks. So part of it's not necessarily only the desire to hide incomes that is the source of this increase in currency. The second thing that if it was currency in the form of cash holding that much of the income was hidden, then I'm afraid we'll have to conclude that there isn't much income that is hidden because the amount of currency in circulation relative to the income or the wealth that exists is simply too small for a very large part of hidden income or wealth, or black income or wealth being held in the form of cash. And that's the reason why we don't expect this by itself to have a very significant impact unless you're going to address the real reasons why this is happening. There was a question about, so the other thing I want to, point out here is that the reason why we use money is, of course, to save on costs of transactions. You don't exchange directly goods and services for other goods and services, but you use money. There are definite conditions in which cash is the preferred or more economical or more convenient. There are other conditions where other non-cash modes of payment are more convenient. So it's not that cash is only used in order to hide something. It is also used because it is more convenient. It is also used because for many people that's the only means that is available. So I don't think that the reduction in the use of cash, significant reduction in the use of cash, will come unless you change the conditions. I think the problem is the argument seems to be that you do demonetization, you do something like this. This will produce the economic transformation which will make for less use of cash. I think the causality runs the other way around.
All
If
right.
the conditions change, then the use of cash will come down significantly.
Yeah, just to add to what Surajit says, within 24 hours, the color of that money can change from black to white and black again. Suppose you have white money and you buy something and don't get a receipt for it, and then the person who's received your money spends it in a restaurant and gets a receipt for it. The money has changed color in no time at all. And secondly, I think it's but obvious that not all cash is black and not all black money is held in cash. We can disagree about the proportions and the velocities. Can I just ask Ashima to make a comment, and you have the concluding remarks, as is the most appropriate.
Okay, thank you. So just briefly the questions. I think this issue on this RBI balance sheet, there are legal restrictions, etc. So the main benefit to the government will come from more information on tax evasion. For education, yes, you need to use all sorts of ways to raise resources, private funding or fees, but also I was suggesting this Bolsa Familia model. Put more money in people's hands to be used for education where they want to spend, which brings competition in the sector. Finally, I'd just like to conclude overall sort of my views on what I've heard in the debate we've had. I think we've been seeing a debate between the macro view and the structuralist view of what should be done in India. The macro view says there's a shock, you need to respond, give a stimulus, the budget should do it. While the structuralist view says there's so much waste, inefficiency, savings are fixed, and therefore if the government spends more. But the macro view says, no, if income is underutilized, as excess capacity, income grows, and savings will also grow. But that said, it is true that, and it's not so clear to me that a consumption-led growth, which increases demand and output, can also increase investment. But I think the issue in India was the consumption-led growth we had after the crisis was dominated by food. A lot of government transfers to the very poor, and that time there were a lot of bottlenecks in the food sector, so it was not sustainable. But a consumption-led growth today, if there are stimulus for consumption, which goes into consumer durables, or as I said, it goes to people who spend on more productive goods, which generates innovation, which increases your productive potential, could sort of lead the economy up out of this trap. But again, the structuralist view is important because there is a lot of waste and inefficiency. So again, what we look to see in this budget are issues such as direct benefit transfers or conditional transfers or tax cuts, which will not just be wasted in the sort of inefficiencies we have in the public sector, but will stimulate more productive consumption and investment and generate growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashima. The last word from you, sir, Dr. Rangarajan.
But concluding comments is your privilege.
No, sir, not at all. It's yours.
To answer specifically one or two questions which were raised, when we are talking about widening the tax base and using the GST as a mechanism, to some extent, the spread of digitalization will also help in that thing, because that is an attempt on the part of many retailers and so on and so forth not to record transactions. Therefore, to the extent to which the digitalization spreads and payments are made and recorded somewhere, it may also lead to the widening of the tax base. As far as the currency is concerned, the actual, in the normal time, exclude the present situation, in the normal times, it is demand driven. I mean, the currency GDP ratio or the currency to any other ratio is not determined by anybody. I mean, as people demand currency, the currency is supplied. And therefore, if the currency GDP ratio has to come down, conditions so created in such a way that the demand for currency goes down, and therefore, as a consequence, it comes down. The demand for currency can go down. This happened in many developed countries in the initial period because the money substitutes came into vogue in a large way. Therefore, when credit cards came in, then less use of currency came. Therefore, the currency ratio, currency to GDP ratio can go down if there are efficient money substitutes and there is acceptability for it. I think that is a direction in which we are also moving. And digitalization may add to that phenomenon. As far as this question that was asked about reserves will increase and so on and so forth as a result of demonetization, that's a bigger topic. I had also written on it, but let me only briefly say that to the extent of the extinguishment of the currency, the liability of the Reserve Bank of India goes down. After an announcement by the government, it is extinguished. Then what happens? As a consequence of this, the asset side gets affected. When the liability goes down, something must happen to the asset side. Therefore, either the asset is written down or the reserves are transferred to the government. One of the things, one of two things can happen. I had in fact suggested that while the surpluses can be transferred to the government, it should be under the condition that it will buy back the government securities, which is the backing for the currency. Now, let me say that until very recently, the currency was backed to a large extent only by the government securities. It's only the phenomenon in the last 10 years when the financial assets, net foreign assets, back the currency. Therefore, one suggestion that I have made is really that to the extent of the extinguishment of the currency, the surpluses will be utilized in order to reduce the government securities, and therefore the benefit to the government is not the total amount, but the interest income on the government securities that is reduced, pari passu with the reduce in the liability. This is one approach that is possible. Anyway, I think you say the last sentence.
The last word is that I hand over proceedings to Mr. Sunil Mathur. He's Vice President of Bombay Chamber. If some of you have not been able to ask questions, my apologies. I hope you're not that hungry. I thank once again all the panelists, and it's been indeed my honor, my privilege to be a moderator of this discussion. Mathurji.
So good afternoon. Before I declare a vote of thanks, I'd like to distribute some mementos to the panel discussion members. Yeah. Thank you very much. 1 minute, yeah. The work is done, the photograph is done.
Gemma, we stop weddings.
No, you're doing it. You were also on the panel. Yeah.
So double taxation is
and of course, yeah. Thank you. And of course, Ashok. You don't give I give a gift home. You don't give a gift home. Yeah, we'll have to watch from health and safety next time. But it is indeed my privilege to perform the pleasant task of proposing a vote of thanks at today's seminar. We've covered a broad range of subjects, starting from the fiscal right down to the gender and everything in between. But I think it has been extremely insightful. And on behalf of the Chamber, I'd like to extend my sincere thanks to the Chief Guest, Dr. Rangarajan. for taking the time out and the trouble to come over here. I think your presence over here has really enlightened us terrifically. You've covered a lot of issues in a very clear, precise, insightful manner, and we're really honored to have been here to listen to you. Thank you also. Unfortunately, Dr. Roy is not here, otherwise I would have liked to thank him as well. He brought across a whole lot of new issues on the table in a very lively, eloquent, and direct manner, I think. In particular, I'd like to thank also the distinguished speakers on the panel. Professor Goyal, Mr. Rajwade is not here just now, Professor Mazumdar, and of course, my friend Ashok. It was indeed a very insightful panel discussion. We've covered a very wide range of subjects. I do hope the budget lives up to the expectations of the panel over here. There are a lot of wishes in there that we all have and that members of the panel also brought out. It's really going to be interesting what eventually emerges in the budget on the 1st of February or whenever it does happen. Special thanks to, of course, Mr. Thakurta. You moderated it very well, but thank you also for helping us organize this and putting your support over here. Finally, of course, to Director General Vijay, Sri Rangan, and each member of the Secretariat for really making this event possible and organizing everything over here. I'd like to invite you all for lunch. Thank you very much.